I'm Primal Piggy. Thank you for joining me for another BDSM United podcast in our Setnakt's Sex Magic series. It's a sex magic series, intermediate level, with a funny name, Setnakt. Setnakt is the given name of a king in ancient Egypt. And the word itself means Set is victorious. And Set was the leading god in the Egyptian paradigm at that time, in the Egyptian country. And it is the taken name by Don Webb, who we get these resources that we're using for this series. So, funny name, but it makes sense if you know that piece of the puzzle. Today, we want to kind of ask the question of why utilize sex magic when there's all kinds of different religions out there. There's I come from a background of like Christianity, but there's people that maybe want to utilize just Tantra or just Buddhism or Islam, or they want to approach sex through any of these other types of religious traditions. Maybe these religious traditions have a set of guidelines that we like to put into, we think would make a good idea to put into practice. But, why utilize sex magic? Well, we have to talk about most of these organized religious systems, or the spirituality that we have that is based on these religious systems, are mainly follow something that in magical circles is called the right hand path. There's like the initiatory magic of sex magic that we're focusing on is on something called a left hand path, and a lot of the tantra is kind of built on this left hand path system. But a lot of the other religions like Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, a lot of those just main systems a lot of it is right hand path. And it's based on the word submission. The guide for happiness or doing things that are good, knowing the value of things, comes from finding a system external to the self and remodeling the self to fit it. And that's the basis of most of these other forms, these right hand path forms of Christianity. It's like becoming one with the universe. This system may take the form of obedience to an idealized being such as the Christian God, or obedience to perceived historical and economic forces, something like Marxism, obedience to a gender group, feminism, or obedience to a racial, national, or an ethnic group. In each instance, the other is perceived as larger and better than the self. And that only in service to this external principle can something good be obtained. Practitioners of this system that we call right hand path can be noble, they can be good men and women who chose their principles wisely. We think we're coming up on Martin Luther King Day, and that would be an example of somebody who is a noble, a good person, or was a good person, or they may be destructive, and they may be idiots who chose their principles badly. Someone like Stalin or Hitler. The right hand path is much easier to understand and explain because it values rules over consciousness. You can find a simple text, a book somewhere that tells you what to do. Its concept of the divine is to see the divine as omnipotent and omnipresent. Man is but a worm in comparison, oftentimes seen in some kind of original sin or some kind of seeing some kind of fault with man. And the purpose of life is to realize how small, frail, and uh, ultimately just bad off we are in ourselves. In this right hand path, God is seen as static, and salvation often comes from achieving a similar static state, whether it be the constant adoration of a Christian heaven or the selfless contemplation of a Buddhist nirvana. Many of the magical and spiritual techniques that are used by us on the left hand path are also used by their right hand path counterparts. There are many similarities in our two paths. Each would stress that surface appearances in the world are somewhat misleading. Each would stress that most people in the world are profoundly asleep and spend most of their energy making sure that no one wakes up. And each would stress that the battle to change the self is an everyday battle. We would see it differently in a lot of ways too, but we do have some similarities. There are many religions that fall outside of this left hand, right hand path dichotomy. A lot of different folk religions, they're not interested in transforming the self, they're only interested in maintenance of the society. And other modes of thought, such as Taoism or like the Thelema of Aleister Crowley, understood it. They ask uh, different sorts of questions on how the good is to be obtained, and they offer a mixture of left and right hand. There is no hatred of these organized religions. I don't hate Christianity. I wouldn't want to follow it. I don't think it's good for people because I've been there and I've been in that. And I just don't think that it's a good system for people. It's not really good for society. I have problems with it because of coming from an aspect of BDSM. Christianity has problems with consent, and consent isn't really built into the framework of Christianity. And so I do have problems there gelling Christianity with BDSM, even though I did a whole podcast on is BDSM biblical, which you can find in our archives. But there's no hatred of these right hand path. I actually have a lot of respect for people in those religions, and I know a lot of people in the various religions, and they're good people, and many of them are friends. And but we have to go through a break oftentimes with this path of these religions, and we have to accept that mindless loathing of other people on other paths, and we just have to be mindful that we don't fall uh, into just being the anti. You know what I mean? We don't want to be an anti the other religion because there's a trap in that. It's somewhat of a form of bigotry that traps us in their system. So that's why I don't use something like, even though I did a whole a whole podcast as well on how BDSM is satanic, just kind of comparing parallels between modern Satanism and BDSM. I don't want to fall in the trap of Satanism because Satanism is built around being the anti Christian. So you're kind of then trapping yourselves within the paradigm of Christianity, and you're not actually free to uh, freeing yourself up and liberating yourself to being a being your true self and being able to uh, exercise your will in the earth and being able to manifest. You're just trapped in an old paradigm and not able to really be free. So that was just kind of a little bit, and it definitely did not do the topic of right and left hand path justice. I do understand that we're kind of limited on a podcast. You can buy a book by Dr. Stephen Flowers called Lords of the Left Hand Path. It's an excellent book. It's in my library. I own it, and you can get it, and we'll provide an Amazon link in the description to the podcast where you can get that if you're really interested in knowing the difference between this right hand, left hand path kind of thing. We find ourselves on the left hand path, on this alternative path, because we know that we want to be transformative. We want our actions. We want something more out of BDSM, and we want to approach BDSM from a spiritual way, where we can utilize our actions to produce spiritual and to produce some kind of results. We have some goals, and we may want to obtain, and we want to use the energy of our connection to accomplish them. And so that is the purpose of sex magic. It's using the act of BDSM, the act of kink play, the act of pain, the act of pleasure, the act of sensation, and that energy that is stirred up in those acts. It's utilizing that energy, and also using the energy of climax, the energy of subspace, the energy of dom space. Is utilizing these energies and focusing them in putting our will into them and releasing it on a desired result. Sounds like a great adventure, hopefully, to you, and you'll continue with this podcast. Thank you for listening. I'm Primal Piggy, and you can find all of our resources, like our podcast and other resources, at www.bdsmunited.com. We'll get more into this, but I just wanted to unpack briefly why even consider sex magic when there's so much else out there. Why do we feel like this is something worthwhile to even look into, especially when some systems say that it's bad or it's wrong? Why do they say that? Well, oftentimes they say that because they want to keep you in their system. They don't want you to look outside of their system for anything. They want to be all inclusive. And oftentimes, because of that right hand path that their ultimate goal says that you should submit to, find your happiness and find your good and find your values and find the results that you're looking for in this God, this figure that, or this concept of God, that you should merge and become one with the universe or one with this God, and that he, she, or it will fulfill all of your desires. That's what this right hand path says. But we, on the other side, say, you know what? I acknowledge that I'm a magical being, that I have a will, I have a soul, I have a personality. There is so much within me that I can make my way in this world, and I can utilize my power to get the things that I need without having to submit necessarily to these other powers and lose my personality and lose my soul and lose all of these valuable things about myself by merging into this void of who they are or who they say I should be. And so we don't want to lose all of the meaningful things about ourselves by conforming and transforming ourselves into becoming one of the Borg, Being assimilated. We don't want to be assimilated. We want to be valued for who we actually are and how great that we actually are as people, as individuals. Thank you for listening today. I hope you get the idea, and I hope I was tried to communicate it the best that I could. And Don Webb did a wonderful job in this resource that we're using. Just, kind of trying to lay it out for you of why we feel this path is a better path, because it takes into account you as a person and you as a wonderful creature that you are. It takes into account that. And we're not asking you to lose yourself in sex magic. We're asking you to utilize yourself in sex magic. It's a joy speaking with you today, and I'll talk to you again soon.